You go, you work, it goes into the bank account, and you go to the bank, but now everything is cashless. The money goes in, you use your debit card, you use your Visa card, and the money goes out. And it just in and out and in and out, and it's like, okay, let me put before I put my hand in my pocket, I'm like, okay, there's no change in here. But now there's nothing, right? So if you don't keep tabs on things, it will just perpetuate itself. And so one of the things that people should do is, if you are saying, okay, you know what, I'm not sure where my money is going, sit down and make a budget. Now, whether you do that, you make a spreadsheet, or you can mentally keep knowledge up here, or you actually have a running total. And so, I found this here, and it says the life goal: to obey Jesus whatever it costs. And if you have your budget, but you have a mission statement there, and you will say the purpose of this budget is what? Whether it's stewardship, whether it's to manage your funds, whatever it is, and then you start listing your sources of income. And then start with your tithe. Take your tithe right off the top. Once that tithe is down, now you start looking at your expenditures. And you start saying, okay, what are these things that I have to pay for? There's things: rent, mortgage payment, insurance. These are things that you must take care of. Food, and you look at all the essentials. And then once you've looked at all the essentials, now you're going to see, okay, do I actually have something left over? And if I do, what do I do with that now? Is this a free-for-all where I can say, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to have fun until the next batch of money comes in? Or are you going to say, okay, you know what? Now that I have this, what is it that I'm going to do? How am I going to budget my disposable income? What are my goals? What are my plans? What is in my future? But step one is to get that budget down so that you're able to get a plan in place. When I was young, parents' vacations were consisting of road trips. And my dad was an avid member of CAA. And if you have ever traveled in CAA, they used to have these triptychs. You remember the triptychs? And you would get that, and it would tell you where the congestion traffic is, where the gas stations are, what you can anticipate. But that map showed you from beginning to end how you were going to reach your destination. And so when you take a look at a budget, you have your starting point, but you also have the end point as to where you want to get financially. And so when you partner with God, you are now able to, on paper, say, okay, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, how am I going to get there? We need to take a look at our needs versus our wants. Because if you have too many wants, the impulse buying, well, what's going to happen? You are going to fall into debt. And nobody wants to fall into debt. I love the outdoors. Every year, we go camping. And my dad has this little pop-up camper that he's had for years. And so if we're not in a tent, we will take this pop-up camper, and it's gotten to the point our family's outgrown it. And so what's happened now, my wife and my daughter, they sleep in the pop-up camper. My son and myself sleep in the tent. And so if I had money, the first thing I would do is I would go and I would buy a brand new camper. But the thing is, that's a want, it's not a need. If you go camping once a year, what am I going to do with it for the rest of the time? I got to pay for storage. I got to leave it here. I got to service it. But I want it, let me tell you. And every summer when it comes, why should I be sleeping in the tent when I could be sleeping in luxury? And if anybody, you went to Gillette, you know what it was like sleeping in the tent over there. That was a whole different experience. But you know what? That is a want. It's not something I need. Because if we're not careful, there's going to be debt. The Bible says this: the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Now, if you're in debt, you are now a slave to the lender. Somebody else controls you. Somebody else now is pulling the strings. You don't want to be a puppet. You don't want to have those strings pulled. You want to be able to be in control, in charge. But when those wants and that impulse buying comes, now you get into that category, and now somebody else is in charge. You know, I was shocked when I was preparing this presentation, and it says Canada has the highest level of household debt in the G7 countries out of anyone when it comes to disposable income. That's terrible. When you look at the survey that StatsCan did, for every $1 that is earned, people are $1.76 in debt. Crazy. But again, and I don't know everyone's circumstance, but when we look at, the needs versus the wants, when the wants gets too big, this is what can happen. And so there's so many people that, have and they have and they have, but it comes at a cost. And so the Bible says this, and we know this story. There's a story told of a man that was in debt. And so he went to the king and he pled. But it says here, since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. Now, this is telling us that in biblical times, there was debt. There was debt then, there is debt now. Now, we do not want, could you imagine me running up the visa and then coming home and the debt collector's there with my wife and 2 kids and says, I'm sorry, I'm taking them and I'm going to sell them to pay off what you did. That would be horrible, because when my wife gets out, I'm dead. But, the servant begged and he was forgiven. But I can tell you right now that if you run up your credit card here and you beg, you're not going to be forgiven. You're going to get interest, and it's going to keep on going. And so we need to see that there are serious, consequences when things get out of control. With money comes responsibility. And how we spend and invest our money, it has an impact not only on ourselves, but on so many other people. I just this week had a church member that called me up, and she actually told me that they're going through some financial challenges. And in their home, there's one that spends and one that saves. And the one that spends got a little out of control, and the amount is extremely high. And she doesn't know what to do now. And I actually have a friend of mine, he's a lawyer, and he works specifically in bankruptcy. And he says that, when people, fall into what we would call the trap, you get one thing and then you want another thing and it starts perpetuating, we don't realize sometimes what that will do to others. And so it's really important that, with the money that we do have, that God has blessed us with, that we have to look at it and be responsible, because it can be used for the benefit of God, but the benefit of so many other people as well, but it can also be detrimental as well. Solomon says this: a house is built by wisdom and becomes strong through good sense. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with all sorts of precious riches and valuables. And so when it comes to the blessings, when it comes to the money that God has given to us, we want to use wisdom and we want to use good sense. If we fall into the trap of the impulse buying, then you have buyer's remorse. And then you're thinking afterwards, should I have done this? But if you take the time and you say, okay, let me process this. Let me see the impact of this. Now, if you have a lot of money in the bank, then maybe this is not going to be applicable. But if you have a lot of money in the bank and you don't exercise good wisdom, what's going to happen? You're going to have less. So you want to be able to discernfully make those wise decisions. Do we have savings? If that rainy day comes, do we have planned savings? Which gets into the start of the budget. You know, if you have X number of dollars to go for the essentials, well, what happens with the leftover? Well, if you want to have savings and you're a bit of a spender, you might want to curb your spending. You might want to say, okay, I need to stop at a certain point. I've gone a little bit far because I need to see the savings section grow. The credit card is one of the easiest things to use because the bill doesn't come right away. And so you can go ahead and just tap and just tap and just keep on tapping. But guess what? As much as you tap, the line items on the statement are going to grow as well. And at the end of all of that tapping, you got a bill to pay. So if that becomes a problem and you want to have some savings, put it away. Set goals and priorities. If you need something, if you said, okay, I'm going to go on vacation a year from now, how much do I need to set aside so that that vacation is going to be paid for so that I don't have to put that on the credit card? You know, if you have an expenditure in your home, if you need to buy a vehicle, whatever it is, set financial goals that you can save for so that when that comes, saving an expenditure. Well, what do I mean by that? Your home, your mortgage or your rent. Well, bill yourself for savings. Put savings there on your budget as a line item that you will say every single month, I'm going to charge myself $20, $30, $50, $100, whatever it is, and I'm going to put that amount as a bill into savings, but I'm not going to touch it. And if you can be disciplined and to do that, it is going to grow, and it will keep on growing, and when you need it, it's going to be there. Really simple techniques that one can use, but you got to be disciplined enough to follow through. Let's look at Pharaoh's savings. The story of Egypt. There was going to be a time when there was going to be a famine. And so there was going to be a collection and storing and holding in reserve. That is what we're talking about when we talk about savings. You have your budget. Pharaoh knew that there was going to be hardship. Well, I can guarantee you that at some point there's going to be something unexpected financially that's going to come. And when that comes, where do you have the assets or the revenue to cover that? If you diligently tuck something aside, let your savings grow and grow and grow so that when you are in need, you're going to have something. The Bible tells this, the wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. There's no fools here. Not in this church. But you know, it's true. It says the wise have wealth and luxury. The key word here is wise. If God has blessed you with what you have to use wisdom with what He's given to you. If you don't exercise that, now you go into the fool's category. And if you spend whatever you get, you don't have anything. And then again, when you don't have anything, when that rough patch comes, what do? You panic. You're stressed. You don't know where the money is going to come from. And we don't want to live that way, especially as stewards. We want to be leaders, not followers. And so, again, we want to make sure that all of our members have wealth and luxury within their means. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to be a millionaire, but when you need something, you have planned ahead to have it there so that you can be financially successful. Philippians 4:12 says this: I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned whether living in plenty or in want. The key word here is to be content. Now, sometimes that's a little bit harder. It's easier said than done. But if we can be content with what we have, and we can say, you know what? I have what I have because this is what God has allowed me to have. I'm not going to be looking beyond at other people, but this is what God needs me to have. And sometimes God is actually saving us from ourselves. Because if God gives us sometimes what we want, who knows what we do with it? Who knows what would happen to us and our salvation if we had that abundance? I would love to be a multimillionaire. But you know what? God might look at me and say, you know what? You can't be a multimillionaire. Because if you are a multimillionaire, what you're going to do and how you're going to live is not what I want. And I can see in you what you can't see. And so God, all being who knows what is best, gives us what we need when we need to have it, but we need to be content. You know, there is this phrase that we've heard, keeping up with the Joneses. Have you heard that before? Well, you know, I don't know who the Joneses are, but people want to keep up with them. But, you know, does having what others have really make us happy? You know, those are two different stories. And as I was looking, I found something else, and it says, don't keep up with the Joneses because they're broke. The Joneses might be in that same category where for every dollar they earn, they're in debt $1.76. Because you can have the appearance that you have everything, and you can look like you're worth everything, but you don't see the other flip side to it. You know, there's an article that I read in a business magazine, and it spoke about two families, actually in Toronto, and these were accomplished people. They had been well educated, their kids were going to the best schools, they had everything in life, and when people looked at both of them, you would think that this is what I want to be. I want to attain, I want to achieve, this would be the pinnacle of success. It's not worth it. At the end of the day, you can fall into that trap. So when you look at your spending, because they want people to think, I'm the Joneses, right? I can do whatever. You know, they've subscribed to everything. They probably have every streaming service. Every magazine is coming to their house. You go over there and you just see all of this stuff and say, wow, I want that. The Joneses don't cook. They go out to eat, right? Every night, a different restaurant, you know? And then they see the word, you know, well, I think there's a deal somewhere over here. I got to buy that. And then they got nothing to do, and so they got probably 5 tablets, you know, which one for a different day, and they shop for different things, and I'll just buy this, I'll just buy that. I'm not even going to think about it. And before you know it, the Joneses are worse off than anyone else, and we want to keep up with them. We want to be them. That's not what God's plan is. God wants us to be faithful stewards. Our lifestyle should be reflective of our income. You know, if you look at the image, there's 2 kids there with desserts. They both have a treat. The little girl has got this nice big ice cream cone. The little boy who's got his treat, he's not content. He wants the big ice cream cone as well. But they both have something. So what God has given to us individually is different. And what we have is now how we should, without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. At the end of the day, as stewards, we need to be content. And if we're faithful to God, We know that he has said, he will never leave us, he will not forsake us. If all we have is Jesus, we're further ahead than anyone else, because he will supply our needs as things come along. Philippians 4:19 exactly says that. God, my God, will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. God has everything. He is the King of the universe. There's nothing that God cannot do. And when we turn our lives and our hearts over to him and our stewardship over to him, we're going to be taken care of. We don't have to stress. The hard times might come, and we might be going through those storms like the disciples on the boat, but he will see us through. You know, in today's society, everybody wants to get rich quick. Everybody says, you know what? What can I do to better my position? Well, we already know. Live on 90%. Tithes and offerings. That's the way to start. But we want to do better than that. We want to go and say, what can I do? But the thing is this, is there's always a risk. And when you start looking at what people are doing, if you see that somebody's doing this and somebody's doing this, the return that you can get, higher risk, what's going to happen? You can hit a home run, or you will lose it all. Risk, reward. Is it worth it? That's where people get caught up, because you never know. You know, it looks so appealing. You know, I'm just within reach. I can get this, you know, but there's something that has been told. I've heard it since I was in school. If it's too good to be true, it usually is. And so I will say this. Well, before I get to that, I learned that lesson the hard way, right? Many, many years ago, and I had just graduated from Andrews. And I came back and I said, oh, you know what? I have all of this knowledge. And there was somebody, you know, that was doing some type of an investment. And so they said, you know what? Give us some money, and we'll put this money here, and you're going to get interest on it, and I'll come and you'll get interest payments regularly. And I said, okay, you know, somebody did it, and then they told somebody else, and they told somebody else, and they told somebody else, and then it entered into my family, and they were like, oh, this thing works. And I said, you know what? There's no way this is legitimate. Something doesn't seem right. You know, it's those pyramid schemes, right? And so I laughed at it, and then I started seeing, you know, well, people started coming with this cash in their hands. Oh, this is my monthly interest payment. I'm like, okay, this is not good. And then, you know what? They started coming back, and they're holding up this money like they won the lottery. You know, mind you, it wasn't a lot of money, but still. And I'm like, man, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. You know, I'm seeing they're doing this. Well, maybe I should do it too. And I had just started working at the conference office, mind you, right? So I didn't have a lot of money, but I had, you know, started saving. And so I had gotten to the point that I had saved $5,000, more money than I had ever had in my entire life, right? So $5,000, I'm on top of the world. You know, I'd actually like to have $5,000 right now, but that's a whole different story. So I had my $5,000, and I'm seeing, you know, uncles, and everyone's like, oh, this thing is amazing. And then I said, you know what? Why is it that they're getting this money and I'm not getting this money? Even though I knew if it's too good to be true, it usually is. So I said, okay, you know what? Call the guy. Bring him home. So he came and he talked to me about this amazing thing, and I wasn't even listening because all I saw was the money that they were getting. He could have told me that, you know, this is not real. I didn't hear that because I wanted the money in my hand. And so I wrote him a check for $5,000, okay? Because you know what? I'm going to go big, right? The more I give, the more I'm going to get back. And this was a Friday, okay? So I said, all right, gave him the check. Oh, it's going to be a matter of weeks, and he's going to show up, and I'm going to be spending money in my hand. And then I got a phone call on the Sunday. Alvin, I'm very sorry to tell you that something has gone wrong, and the investment scheme has tanked. My $5,000 that I had saved for goodbye, that's right, wasn't even 48 hours, and it was gone. Risk, reward was not worth it. And so I can tell you from my personal experience that, have I ever done that again? No, I have not. Because I looked to see what everybody else was doing. What worked for them did not work for me. Don't copy others. When somebody does something and that is specific to their circumstance, whether they're investing in something, whether they're doing this, whatever works for them, well, that's great. But that might not work for you. Make sure that you get help if you're looking to invest or whatever it is from the right people. You know, there is different steps that you can take. But you want to make sure you talk to more than one person, right? There's so many different things out there that people have. Would you jump on the first one? You know, if you had to buy a car, are you going to buy the first car that you see? No. You're going to shop around. You're going to look to see what is going to suit your situation, what is going to meet your needs. And when it comes to taking the money that God has blessed you with, you need to use the same approach. You need to make sure that you do what's going to work for you based upon your goals, based upon what you need to do specifically for yourself. The Bible tells us this: without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. In my personal situation, I didn't talk to anybody. I just jumped ahead because I said, I'm going to do this. If I had talked to a couple of other people, maybe they would have put some sense and say, hey, you were actually saying this, you were thinking this, why are you doing this now? But I didn't stop to think. And as a result, I did not succeed. We need to make sure that when you look at your finances, when you look at what you have, you do not leave a mess for somebody at death. The story is told of this widow. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slave. If your finances are in order, that's wonderful. But if your finances are not in order, what happens when you pass away? Nothing is going to change. The bill collector is still going to come. He's not going to be worried about whether you've passed away or not. You owe money to somebody and they want it. When that happens, you could be leaving something terrible for someone that's left behind, that has to take care of everything. You're going to leave a mess. Now, I can tell you what you see in that image. When I was in charge of Kingsway Pioneer Home, on occasion, now this is not from the building, I had a few situations just like this. There was one time that a lady, she was a hoarder, she fell in her unit and nobody saw her for 2 days. And they said, where is she? They called the family, the superintendent opened the door, looked inside, and they said, there's no one here. And then they told the children, they said, you better look around and see. The kids came to the apartment, and when they lifted stuff up, Mom was underneath some stuff. She had fallen, she had gotten hurt, and she couldn't get up. She was lucky that somebody came. We had instances where that had happened, and we did not know until there was an odor coming from the unit. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But when you look at your finances, if things are not in order, the estate trustee or the executor is now going to have to deal with that situation. Whatever you have not dealt with, whatever is outstanding, and if you do not have a will that is prepared and your stuff is not in order, this is what is going to be for somebody to deal with. You don't want to do that to anybody. You know, as I mentioned this morning, I had an uncle that just recently passed away from cancer. And it kind of came on very aggressively. It came on very suddenly. And when he had an inkling that something wasn't right, he went to the funeral home. He made all of his arrangements. He actually took his spouse with him and said, you know what, I want all of this done. He explained to her that what should be done so that when he passed, there was nothing that was going to be questioned. They knew exactly what was going to happen. And I went to see him at his home before he ended up in the hospital. And he said, you know what? He goes, we've done our will. Everything should be okay, but I need you to go over it with Auntie. And so actually tonight after Sabbath, I'm going to be doing that with her. But the thing is this, you want to make sure, when you look at finances, while you're living, when you're gone, those finances, good or bad, are still going to be there. And somebody's going to have to take care of that. You do not want them to deal with that type of a situation. You want everything in order because God has said this. Set your house in order. Set your finances in order. Make sure that what God has blessed you with, whatever you have that you are responsible for, you are going to ensure that that is going to be in a manner so that somebody is going to be able to handle it. And I can tell you from what we just went through, you know, when you lose a loved one, there's a lot of grieving that happens. You know, and this one, it just came and hit us so rapidly. And when that happened, because things were organized, because we knew what was supposed to happen, it made it a little bit easier. Because now it was a matter of fulfilling my uncle's wishes to follow through what he had said. There was no guesswork. Whatever we have, whatever we think is ours, you can't take it with you. And the Bible says this, why you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Can you imagine living on this earth 80, 90, 100 years, but in the big scheme of things, you're just a mist. You're here for a little while, and then you vanish. You're gone until Jesus comes. But your finances, your money, if you've taken care of it, it's not going to vanish, but what's going to happen to it? See, a good man, and I'm going to say a good woman, leaves an inheritance to their children's children. That can be financial. What God has blessed you with, you can make sure that that goes down to your kids, and it can filter right down to your grandkids if they've been taught how to manage things properly. And if you don't have a lot of assets, well, guess what? The gospel message, whatever you have that is about you, those traits can be passed down as well. Stewardship is not just money, it's everything. And that can go down from generation to generation as well. See, a steward can plan with a will, number one. When you die, if you have a will, the will is going to say, this is my testament to the world. This is who I am. This is what I want to have done with my assets. This is who's going to be in charge of things. This is who is going to receive. There is organization. there is order. There's not going to be chaos. And then somebody is going to fulfill all of that. If you don't have that document done, well, guess what? It's still going to be done. I had a phone call from someone recently who said, you know what? My spouse died. They didn't have a will. And I need to get X, Y, and Z done. I have to get something appointed through the court. It's going to cost me $2,000. Is there another way? I said, I'm really sorry, but there's no other way. If this is what the lawyer has told you based upon your situation, this is what you have to do now. The will, had it been done, it would have been seamless. Unfortunately, it wasn't done. The other thing is this. If you have wishes and plans, and as a steward, you might say, you know what? God has blessed me with what I have. And I want to make sure that I'm going to return in death as I did in life. I want to give God back something. I want to give something to Mount Zion. I want to give something to God's work. Well, if you die without a will, the government has a plan in place. And what that plan does is it's going to give it to your next of kin. People that you might not want to receive are going to receive. But that plan does not include charity. If you wanted God's work to benefit and you don't have a will, it's not going to happen. If you wanted your church, your conference, wherever to benefit, you have to do that. The government is not going to do that for you. So when you have planned ahead as a steward, you are now in control and you make sure that your testament to the world speaks to everyone to say, yes, God has blessed me. God has given me this, and this is what I'm doing with it. There's also powers of attorney. So wills kick in when you pass away. But the powers of attorney protect you while you're living. So if I got sick and I am not able to take care of myself, well, somebody can step forward, but they might not be the right person. I can choose who I trust and who I want in that role so that they will do that for me. I am in control. I choose who is the best suited for that position. So God forbid if that happens to me, I'm covered. I don't have to worry about a thing because those individuals will be there to fill in for me. And if I get better, wonderful. My business continues. Everything is the way that it should be, and then I continue on. But these documents are a part of stewardship. We want to make sure that we have this all done. But people will say, well, I don't want to do a will. If I do a will, and I don't know if this is in the Filipino culture or not, if I think about a will, what's going to happen? You're going to die. I think this one covers every culture. Ellen White said this, though. Wills should be made. And not only should they be made, they should be made in a manner to stand the test of law. If you're going to do a will, do it properly. Don't get a piece of paper, or a napkin and put some thoughts down there and say this should work. But for those that are superstitious, she said this: death will not come one day sooner because you have made your will. Making a will is not going to kill you. In our country, though, about half of the Canadians don't have this done. And those that are 55 and older don't have it done. And what happens when you don't have this document? You're leaving it for somebody else to figure out what's going to happen to you. And as stewards, is that how we should live? Absolutely not. I leave you with this text over here. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution, but the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. As stewards here at Mount Zion Church, we do not want anyone to suffer the consequences. We want to make sure that as you've gone through looking at finances, and this is just basic financial information. When it comes to your stewardship, that you're faithful to God so that God can bless you. And if you fall asleep in Jesus before he comes, you have these documents done so that not only are you making a testament to the world, but you're taking care of those that are left behind so that your legacy can continue.
Thank you, Brother Alvin. We will have Q&A, questions and answer. We'll give Alvin a little rest as Franz will render a musical number. Thank you, Franz. Thank you. We have a treat today, 2 saxophones, and you probably wonder why that is. The first number was JX was not feeling well today, so that's the reason why. Anyway, questions? Okay po. Mike? That's
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if Brother Alvin will agree with me, but I opted to make, instead of making a will, I'm making a living trust. Okay? And because when you make a trust, you don't go through probate. You don't go through probate, and your records are not made public. It's private. That means you don't go to court. And also, you do away with capital gains. Do you agree with me?
So I'm not going to say I agree, I'm not going to say I disagree. So there's a difference between a will and a trust.
Living trust.
A living trust. And so a will is a document that is there that is going to direct the disposal of one's assets upon death. Now, a trust is something that can be held with assets during your lifetime and even after death. And so, as of late, this question has come up quite a bit in our churches. And so, these are things that are case specific. So, depending upon what one's assets are, depending upon what you have, and I would always say this, you want to consult with a financial person first, because these are tools that you can use based upon your specific circumstance. So, for me to say that you shouldn't do that, I could be completely wrong. Because at the end of the day, what you're looking to do is employ strategies that might be more tax beneficial. And so if you talk to a qualified person and they will say, based upon your asset base and what you have, this is something that you could utilize, then absolutely. If somebody has told you and explained to you what works best, then you go ahead and you do that. So, to give you an example, many years ago, there was a doctor, and he called me up and he said, I spoke to my tax person, and we have a rental home. And if we sell that rental home, as you said, there's going to be capital gains. And so we're going to sell it. We want to donate it to the church for different ministries. But he actually said, in order for you to maximize the tax savings and also the donation, he's advised us not to sell the house, donate the house. And so that's what he did. He donated the house. He didn't pay any capital gains. He got a donation receipt on the face value of the home, and then the money was used as a donation, and then there was other tax savings as well. So I would say if someone has counseled you to do something and it works for you, and that's what we said in the slide, you have to do what works for you. And if that works for you, wonderful. But if that doesn't work for everybody else, then you want to talk to a qualified person, because what did we say? Many counselors bring success. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Brother Alvin, I already prepared my will, but my question is, does it need to be signed by a lawyer? I have a family friend witness it, but it's not been signed by a lawyer. Does it need to be?
So what we have found is this. Now, there is something, and I'll get right to the basics. There's something that's called a holograph will. A holograph will is something that somebody can just write by hand and that they can sign and date, and that's a valid will in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
Now, you can prepare your own will, And you can go ahead and you can say, okay, I have this prepared, I've signed it, I have it witnessed, that's my will. So what happens now is this, is you have this document that is prepared, but depending upon what your assets are at death, your will might have to go, as our sister said over here, through probate. Now, what probate is your will be kind of verified through the court system to legally appoint that individual to serve in that role as the estate trustee or the executor. And so, in order for that to happen, there's a little fee that's paid to the court, but then you get this document that has the stamp on there from the courts that say this person is now in charge of your estate. One of the things that they look for is the affidavit of execution. And so this affidavit is done at the lawyer's office. And so what they will do is if they see that this was done at a lawyer's office, this is the original will, it's in their mind a valid document. If it's not done, now they're going to say, is this a fabrication? Is this for real?
Okay.
And so it might go through, and I'll tell you that years ago, we had somebody that actually did their will, just, they had it witnessed,
Yeah.
and then the person died. And so now the will is there, and the conference was involved in that one. And so they said, okay, we need it probated. So we said, we'll help you. We'll take it to the lawyer to get it probated. The lawyer said that the court wanted a statement from one of the witnesses to verify that this person was of sound mind when it was done.
Okay.
And they had to go get a signed statement from that person. So nothing is impossible, but it's just a few extra steps. So what you have might be good, but, and again, the contents of that, sometimes a legal person would look at and say, did you consider this, this, and this? And sometimes things get omitted as well.
Okay. Now, one last question then. If by the time of my death, I have extra money left over, because I have already assigned to, and if you want to donate a portion of that to church, do you need to specify the ministry, or the church will take it and do it whatever is needed? I mean, what is your advice?
So if you leave it to the church
Yes.
and you don't specify, it's
Yes.
called unrestricted.
Oh, okay.
Whatever the church wants to use and they vote through the board for that time,
Oh, okay.
it will go there. Now, if you want to, like let's say you have a ministry that's dear to you,
Yes.
you can specify it and then it would only be used for that ministry. There's no right or wrong.
Okay.
It's what you feel comfortable with. But some people, would say, I've been in community services my entire life. I wanted to go to community services or Pathfinders or Sabbath school. Or sometimes I've seen people say, I'm leaving a certain percentage to this ministry and the church can do what they decide with the rest. So it's completely as God directs you.
So do you advise then that I go to your office or to hire a lawyer?
So
or
you know what I would say, if you want, give me a phone call.
Okay.
And then maybe we can take a look at what you
Okay.
have.
Okay.
And then you can decide from there if you're comfortable with the way it is.
Okay.
Then you can leave it, but if
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Does the conference do trusts? I know you do wills, right? But do they do trusts?
so the conversation, the suggestion is that you would go and you would seek independent counsel from, someone that a financial.
I would like to know if, how does it work?
So that's a really good question. So the lawyer that we work with, what we do is and then what we do is when you sit down with the lawyer, they'll take a look and they'll have the discussion with you. So the conference is actually not involved in that part of it when you talk with the lawyer. What I have seen as a recommendation, depending upon where people are from, is they will suggest that you maybe have a will done in Canada for your Canadian assets. And then if you have assets outside of Canada, that you have a will with those laws over there. So that would cover assets, say in the.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any more questions? I know we're past time, but probably just in case, I also asked Ed to come inside. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Elder Alvin. This has been exceptionally important for our church. Can you explain to our church if and what is there a fee structure to come see you and to help us prepare wills? And second part of that question would be, what is best practice on how often we should update our wills?
So if you are a church member on the books in the Ontario Conference, this is a free service that the conference provides to its members. So we're an option for you. If you need us, we're there. If you have maybe your own lawyer or someone that you're more comfortable with, go to where you think will help you the best. But we are here as a resource for one to use. And so as long as you're a Seventh-day Adventist member, you have membership here, we're able to work with you. In terms of how often you should change it, whenever there is a circumstance within your document where, let's say, someone has passed away, where maybe there's sometimes relations are not the same with people anymore, anything that has impacted, then you go ahead and you make that change. What we do at the conference office is we suggest every 5 years, take out your document and look at it. You don't wait. You go ahead and get it done at that time.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned about a living. What's a living will?
So I think it was the trust question that she was referring to.
Oh, not a living trust.
Yeah, it was the trust.
How about power of attorney?
So the power of attorney, that's where when someone decides that in advance of someone getting mentally incapacitated. So if you were needing somebody, let's say, to be a representative for you in a medical situation, you would choose right now, while you have your mental faculties about you, who you would appoint in that role, and then also for your finances. So you would pick somebody that you would prefer to manage your money, invest everything, and I think we're going to get a legal explanation now.
No, I was just gonna mention there's two different types of power of attorney. One is for medical decisions. One is for financial decisions. You can have a different person doing your medical decisions and a different person doing your financial decisions. So, if you want, say your accountant to do your financial decisions, you can appoint them. You should tell them that they have been appointed and you can put restrictions on it, whether you're mentally there or if a doctor has to declare that you're mentally incapacitated, you can put that in your power of attorney so that it only takes effect after that point. Or you can say, no, as soon as I sign this document, this person is authorized to make those decisions.
Thank you, Ed. Yes, Wayne. Sorry.
That's okay.
Do you have another appointment or we need to close?
No, it's
Okay.
Sorry. What happens if there's no power of attorney or if the person appointed has already passed and there was no revision to it?
So we normally recommend or suggest that you have a backup as well.
Named in the document?
So you would have a first choice and a second choice.
Okay.
So then that way what you do is, if somebody cannot act, that you have somebody there, which gets into Judy's question, is that if there is a change that's happened, you don't want to wait and sit on that. You want to update it right away.
But if there's none, what happens?
So I'm going to call our lawyer to come up and I'm going to ask him to, now that he's here, I'm going to utilize him.
Can I stand over there?
Yeah. You can come up here. So if there's no POA and it dies, then
Okay, so just very quickly, wills are only effective when somebody passes away. Powers of attorney are only effective while people are still alive. Okay, so So, so if the person who has power of attorney passes away and the person who gave the power of attorney is still living, and there is no substitute, there are sometimes, especially in medical situations, there's emergency powers of attorney that can be signed. With banks, you might, like for financial decisions and that kind of thing, you may be able to get special clearance, but you have to approach the bank with, hey, this is the situation. The person who used to deal with my finances is no longer available. If you have that capacity, right? If you don't have that capacity, then it becomes more difficult, obviously. But usually there are alternative ways to secure somebody to be able to make decisions for you while you're incapacitated. So it becomes a little bit more fuzzy when there was no alternates. That's why, like he said, we always suggest, a second or a third. And one other thing that I want to mention is you should be careful about making more than one person a joint attorney, because then they both have to agree on every decision. Sometimes some person's not available, maybe they went on vacation, maybe they're not able to make that decision at the same time, and the bank is going to say, no, you don't have two signatures here, we can't move forward. So it's better to have a succession, number one, number two, number three, versus, oh, my kids have to make decisions always. Sometimes they don't agree, and sometimes that becomes a problem. So.
And we had experience too lately. And by the way, Adelmer is our lawyer in 2 occasions. So get him. He's helping us a lot. Question, Alvin. Your executrix,
Yes.
if it's a woman, should be within Canada, or can you get someone outside of Canada? Oh, whoever else.
Yeah, do you want to? It's
easier.
You don't have to select somebody that's in Canada, but selecting somebody elsewhere makes it difficult for things to happen quickly, right? Obviously, right? And and especially when it comes from certain jurisdictions, they will have to post insurance, or what's called a bond, for any decisions that they make, because maybe they're not familiar with the process, and it has to go through what's called, they used to call it probate, now they call it estate administration. It has to go through the court, and there's a process there. So it's much easier to select somebody in the jurisdiction that the will and the assets are, and so that would be Ontario.
Yeah, and my follow-up is, it's very, very convenient and helpful when you make a will or a POA that you should have an alternate.
Yeah.
Because in our case, Lorna used to be an alternate, but when she passed away, there was another one. It happened to be me, and so there was no much problem there. I just take over.
Right.
Right.
Right, and so like we were saying, a succession of different alternates would probably be best, not only for powers of attorney, but also for wills. And then one other thing that I would mention, and that we always have to mention when people are doing powers of attorneys and wills, is that if you name somebody as that person, you have to understand that that person has the ability to misuse their power of attorney and their will, and you are willfully giving them that opportunity to misuse their stuff, right? The authority that you're giving them. So that is something that you have to understand. If you don't understand that, then you're not actually able to give your power of attorney. Just so you're aware.
Thank you, Alvin. Any more? Oh, last one. Okay, last one,
Sorry.
please.
No, that's okay. Make my job easier.
Okay, last.
I'm actually
Okay,
in a
my-
Zoom meeting right now.
My question is, can you please explain the difference between POA and substitute decision maker? Should we take both, like we have POA and at the same time decision SDM?
So, well, I'm not sure what. So the law that actually allows us to make decisions on somebody else's behalf is called the Substitute Decisions Act, right? That is what authorizes the POA. So I'm not sure what the difference is between those two, because we probably don't use that term, substitute decision maker. But depends what it's for. Maybe it's for specialized things in your field, right? Like if there's a I don't know, in your job or whatever, that somebody else would have to make the decisions for you that doesn't require a POA, then maybe it's that. But generally, like I said, powers of attorney are for making substitute decisions for either financial decisions or medical decisions, right? So I don't know, I can't answer it any other way.
That? Okay. Not that I do play, okay? I got a situation when someone, just for example, someone gave me a will, and I knew that money came from lottery.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
No, it's a common knowledge.
Okay.
Some members do win on lottery.
That's
But
fine.
the question is,
Fine.
does the church accept lottery winning as donation or offering?
That's a good question. I've never come across that one yet. And usually I would say this, when money does come in, we don't know where it came from. Well, so what happens is, so there's something that's called the conference church. And so there might be shut-ins, there might be people that they don't have their membership anywhere, and they have their membership, say, through the Ontario Conference, and they will send tithes and offerings that way. And so it's kind of like, whoever the church treasurer is here, when they fill out the tithe envelope and it comes in, they're not going to say, well, hey, where did you earn this? Where did the money come from? They're just receipting it, right? And so the same thing happens there. Now, if maybe the week before you saw somebody holding up a big check in the newspaper, then you might be able to put two and two together. But, that's a good question, but I've never encountered that one yet, so I don't know what the answer is. But if you're the first to win, call me first, okay?
I can't speak on behalf of the conference, obviously, but my understanding of it was that if the lottery winning or whatever is publicized and they understand that the funds came from the proceeds of playing, my understanding, to donate it, right? That's my understanding, but I can't speak on behalf of the conference, so.
Question. In some case, if I die, right? I understand there's an inheritance, of course, for the kids, right? But my question is how they can get away from taxes. Because, of course, if they have inheritance, they have to pay taxes. What's the best way to solve that problem, or if you can put it in trust, how are we going to do it?
Okay, if you ask me that as a lawyer, I would say, speak to a financial specialist, because they're the ones that can actually structure things so that when you pass away, the smoothest transitions between people with avoiding taxes, which is legal, right? That's how people do it, right? We work for a lot of wealthy people at our firm, and it's not us that gives them the advice. It is their financial specialist that tells us what to do to structure the flow of money, right? That said, what we can do, what everybody can do, is if you have property, there's certain things that you can do to make sure that property passes without having to go through the will, which is, number one is taking title as joint tenants. That will automatically allow the surviving people to receive title. There's caveats there. Don't take that as a blanket statement, but that's one way that people transfer property without having to go through estate administration tax. And then also, if you can put benefit, just like insurance, right? If you can put beneficiaries on accounts, those beneficiaries will automatically receive the proceeds of that account after you pass away, right? So if you can put a beneficiary on an account, that will pass outside of any kind of estate administration. But beyond that kind of stuff, you'd have to talk to a financial specialist. Okay. Thank you both.
You know, we started the Q&A, and I texted Ed. I don't know if he even saw my message. I said, "Are you in church? Please come in." Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed. Before we close, thank you, everyone, for attending. I know this is being live streamed. For those who have missed it, you can review if you missed part of it. And even the sermon this morning, there were lots of nuggets. If you missed the sermon this morning, go to our YouTube page and you will see it. Before we close, Alvin, just a little something for Mount Zion. Yes, thank you. The one inside there is original, handmade by somebody from church. Thank you, whoever that person is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go for our closing resources from Alvin.
So let's all stand and we'll sing, "My Eyes Have Seen the Glory." 647. We just sing the first stanzas only. Sing. "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is coming out of Adventist where the graves of wrath are stored. He has lost the faithful lighting on his terrible sword. He is through his mighty arm. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. He is through this mighty arm.
Let us close our eyes for the closing prayer. Our dear loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we have spent together and for the wisdom shared during our seminar. We are grateful for the gifts you have entrusted to us and for the opportunity to learn how to be better stewards of your creation. As we leave this place, inspire us to act with purpose and generosity, using our resources to serve others and glorify your name. May we carry the lessons learned today into our lives with the spirit of gratitude and service. In your holy name we pray. Amen.